You could interview 10 people, no, you could interview 10,000 people that had been in the infantry and been in combat. And everybody's experience was unique. War does that to you. And that particular war was a very individualistic war because most of the battles were small unit battles, 20, 40, 60, 100, 600 people involved. And it wasn't mass armor battles like you think of in World War II or masses of Chinese attacking the Marines at Chosin Reservoir. This was 5, 10, 15, 40 people meeting on chance meetings and fighting it out in most cases. So everybody's experience was unique and different, and depending on what service you were in and where you were located, the war was a very different scene from place to place. As an officer, you're taught to keep a professional distance from the men. Now, when you live with someone 24/7 for 13 months, that's impossible. You become friends. You know everything about them. I mean, my radio operators, to this day, I can tell you where they were born, what schools they went to. I mean, you have all this time and you talk about each other's lives.
If you get too close, it's over-identification with your men. Okay, that's what they call it in the military, especially officers. If you get too close to your men, then when you lose one, it affects you so bad your thinking. It's not clear for fighting. It's not clear to make decisions. You can lose that, and if you lose that, you lose more men, even yourself. So you have to be careful about that.
It was a responsibility I feared, because one of the things I was very concerned about was getting somebody else killed and have it be on my conscience. To not make mistakes, to know exactly where I am, so that if I have to call in artillery, hopefully I can call it in the right place. If I have to call in the medevac chopper, I can call it into the right place. If I have to just get the hell out of Dodge, I can head in the right direction rather than the wrong direction. I try to be even in the duties that I would pass out to the different men. Be the disciplinarian, try to be the good guy, sometimes try to be the bad guy.
The conscience of that unit is the officer and the NCOs. So if those people have no moral compass, it can soon, go astray.
Now, I'm sure that some of the special forces, because there was a lot of them over there that did things that were cricket, drugs and stuff like that, but I wouldn't allow my boys to do that. I just wouldn't allow it. I'm not going to the bush with you when you don't know when you're at. When I taught the guys, I was very hard on them because I wanted them to learn to know what they were going to get into. It was not going to be Father Flanagan's Boys Town. This is going to be heavy duty. These people were going to kill you, and they don't care, so you have to really be careful. You learn to love these guys. It's very difficult for me because you love these guys. They're like your kids, even though you're not old enough to be their father. They're still like your kids. Yeah. You don't want them hurt. I would love you guys. If you'd have been there with me, I would have loved you guys, and I would have watched out for you. You probably wouldn't have liked me very much because I was very tough and very hard. I had to be, or you wouldn't survive. That's all I was doing. And so, but I cared about you in here. Well, you probably wouldn't believe that. Yeah, he didn't care about me, and he'd been really pushing me hard. That's so that you'll come home.
Medics, think of them as combat nurses.
Yeah.
They took care of the crisis at the moment. Patched up people to put them on helicopters to send them off to surgery or whatever they needed.
Yeah.
But they were our nurses in the field.
My primary job was either to work in the field as a medic, or every once in a while they would send us to battalion aid, which is the sort of the front line tents, sort of like a MASH unit. I would do things there. I could care for patients and do help with surgery and stuff like that. So, but it's primarily just being a field medic.
Some of the corpsmen would be very stiff and would want really nothing to do with us. Others were just part of the group. They'd carry all the all their medications and medicines and bandages and all the equipment that they needed. Plus, they'd also, when we have guns, they'd grab a bandolier of machine gun ammunition, bring that along. They'd carry an extra mortar around. They were just one of us. For an ambush, if I was setting up an ambush, I would work out the shape and the size of the ambush and the position of it, and I would tell the gun team where to set up, and usually there would be something that would set off an ambush, say a claymore mine or a trip flare of some sort, at which time guns would then open up. Normally we'd keep the guns in about the middle of the platoon, and if we saw something coming up, say we're going to cross a river, we'd call for guns up, and guns would then come up, set up a security force to cross the river. We use them a lot. We're always calling them up: guns up, corpsman up, radio man up, lieutenant up. It was also our job to protect them until we needed them. Depending on how long we would be gone would also determine how much ammunition we'd be carrying, because machine gunners can't carry enough ammunition, so everybody else would carry 100 rounds of ammunition. They had a curious position. I know when I would walk point, I would carry the M79 grenade launcher, because they had a round in it called a canister round, which was basically just I don't know, it's 40 millimeter shotgun shell is basically what it was, a one-shot shell. It was, and if you come around a corner and there's the enemy there with their machine gun, you only have a moment to fire, and you only get one shot. And I figured the M79 grenade launcher would be the best piece of equipment for me to use. But normally they'd be in the middle of the pack, and if we saw something, a couple hundred yards out, we'd have the grenade launcher, have the M79 guy fire at it, and they always enjoyed making something go bang and blow stuff up.
Headquarters section, it was myself, and I had a radio operator. Communications are the most important thing in combat that you can have. The radio operator was like your closest friend. It was your lifeline. It was the survival of the platoon. It was communications with your senior officer, with the rest of the company. It also was my communication with the 3 squad leaders. They each had a radio and had a radio man designated with them. So the radio operator and I, if we stopped, he stopped. If I ate, he ate. If we had a drink of water, we did everything together. We were never more than 2 arms apart.
Now, the enemy in most any war, except maybe World War II, would try to eliminate you altogether. In other words, bump you off, and then you have to worry about you anymore.
Right.
But the Vietnamese thought more in the line of crippling.
Yeah.
Incapacitate you. So if you get hurt, it's going to take him and me to get you back to safety. That's 2 guys they don't have to worry about anymore. 3, actually. The one they hurt and you and me. We have to go to get you back to safety so you can get home in one piece.
Yeah.
That's what they like to do. You have to watch out for tripwires. They're very clever with these. And when you hit one of those tripwires, you'd have what we used to call them body slammers. They come around the spikes all over. You've probably seen them in the movies.
Yeah.
And they come around and slap you against a tree with the spikes through you. Now that usually wouldn't put you out forever. But the punji sticks, which were in the ground, in a 5-gallon can sometimes, they would cut holes, punch holes. They would drop or put the can in there with these bamboo sticks, very sharp.
Yeah.
And they soaked them in human excrement. Okay?
Infected.
And infection by the ton. And so when you would step in this, naturally you step in a hole, right? And you're automatically going to pull your foot out. Well, when you did, these things came up because you pulled out and they would run right through your boot, right through your pants and stick right through you because they were pointed down. So there was just enough room for your foot to go in, and then when you pulled up, you got nailed. So you got the punji sticks to worry about. I had to make sure they understood that these people were very, very highly dangerous. They were not to be taken lightly.
Yeah.
They knew what they were doing. This was their land. They knew how to fight it. That's the reason why we used a lot of different methods to fight them. But like I say, they're very tricky, and so you had to watch out. You see in the movies a lot where they're walking around with their M16s and they're jogging through the trails like they're on their backyard, they're on a Sunday school picnic. You didn't do that in real life. You were very slow and you didn't make any noise. You hear these guys, hey, George, what are you doing, man? Watch out where you don't yell.
Yeah.
Not in the bush.
Yeah.
Yelling draws attention, and you might get killed. So you don't yell. You keep your mouth shut, your eyes open, your ears open. You got something to say it with your hands.
Yeah.
And I used to tell my boys, I don't want no smoking. I don't want nothing going on.
Wow.
You need to drink. You out of your canteen. You wait until we get in the spot where we know we're not going to be in trouble. You open the canteen, you let that ding-ling-ling-ling, and it hits the side of it. You make a lot of racket. Any kind of racket you make in the bush is dangerous, so you have to be careful about that.
North Vietnamese did not always sacrifice their men. Sometimes they did, but frequently they just hit and run, hit and run, hit and run. They did a very, very good job. And then we might not find them again for a week or two or three. I mean, we'd be out looking for them. We knew they were there. We knew they were around. They knew we were there. They knew we were around. But frequently we just miss each other by a little bit, which was not a bad thing.
When you go to war or you're in the military, that is your life. That's what you're all about. That's what happens. And it just becomes your day-to-day routine. War is just part of your life.
A lot of times it was dull, it was tedious, it was hot, it was cold, it was wet, it was dry, it was dusty, it was dirty. No clothes, no food. And then all of a sudden we'd be in a big ambush or we'd be in a big firefight, and things would get really exciting for a couple of days, and a lot of blood, a lot of bodies.
We got in a firefight. We used to go on the rice paddies when we were on patrol, is because we thought that maybe they wouldn't mind their rice paddies. They wouldn't blow up their own food, in other words. So we'd go through there. Well, they surprised us. They were on the other side waiting. I lost 3 guys, just like that. They were talking and they were dead. That's as fast. AK-47 is a very devastating weapon. I cleaned out 3 of my guys. 2 of them, well, 2 died, 1 dead, 1 survived. Blew me out of the rice paddy. Now, the rice paddy is planted with animal excrement and human excrement. So you haven't lived it, you stuck your face in one of these. But if you don't stick your face in it, you'll get it blown off. So you stick your face in it.
Adversity is part of the training. And even though you don't like your living conditions, you're sick of the food, you're sick of the heat, you're sick of the bugs, the discipline takes over. As a Marine, you're trained to follow the mission and stick with it. And for the most part, there wasn't a lot of belly aching when I was there.
I was 19 years old, so we're just, a lot of us were just being kids and goofing off and seeing what we could do, what we could get out of doing what we had to do. It's a curious time when you're 19 and you have a lot of responsibility. When you don't have responsibility at that moment, then you let things slide and you goof off and you just have fun.
I spent 15 months terrified, mostly.
Really?
I drank a lot. That dulled me a bunch, and I went to Sydney for R&R, but fun is, I can't relate to fun.
The men will tell you, generally speaking, that they were always in the dark. They didn't understand what was going on. An officer usually had a broader picture. Even though I was just part of one company, commanding one platoon, I usually knew more than what the guy 100 yards in front of me, who was the lowest man in the lowest fire team, the most junior. He'd just gotten there that week, and he felt like he was walking around in a wet paper bag in the dark.
The way I looked upon it then, it was just doing my job as a Marine and hoping to get through. We're looking forward to R&R. We're looking forward to doing anything but hoping we'd get supplied with food that day. Little things would become important. Getting a package from home with some bubble gum in it, some pistachio nuts. I left pistachio shells all over Vietnam. Learning to enjoy warm beer. Everybody's personal amount of ordnance. In my case, it was 500 rounds of M16 ammunition in magazines, so I was all ready to go. That and a few grenades and a 45 that my parents had sent me, so I had my own 45, and I would carry all that, depending if it was a 3-day patrol, 2 days worth of food, and a gallon of water, and hopefully we'd all make it back. There would be operations that were very, very difficult to tolerate if you were in an area for a long enough period of time where there had been enough carnage, where all you can smell is decay, and then after a while you don't even smell that, and that's kind of when you know you've been around too many bodies too long.
We lost people every day to booby traps and never fired our rifles once. Never found an enemy to kill. You can see how you could get so angry after days of losing friends and your fellow Marines and never have anyone to shoot or anyone to take your anger out. Or
when you get so close to people as a medic and you see a lot of people killed and you can't do anything about it, and that adds to your anger and your frustration and things like this, and dealing with politics and things like this that go really contrary to reality. You know, you're seeing all these people getting killed. You have to help people with serious wounds. In my case, I think the two hardest things in the Army is being a chaplain or a medic.
I picked up a lot of bodies, and it seemed like every day I was flying to, and I'm sure it wasn't, it just seemed like it, to grave registration and dropping off bodies. And that was always hard. I think over time, though, the thing that got me the very most is I found myself celebrating things that shouldn't have been celebrated. Being glad for things that rational, normal human beings wouldn't be glad for. And I saw the darkness in my heart, and I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know how to deal with it. It was probably long-term the hardest part for me.
I can also tell you stories where 8 and 9-year-olds came in right before dark and asked for food, and we were always typical Americans. We'd give them our food and share. We loved kids, and this 9 or 10, 11-year-old boys were begging for food, and when the Marines, we had all our fighting gear out, and we were 2 men to a hole, and then 20 yards away, and about 40 yards from where my hole was for the night, these 2 kids dropped a grenade in the hole when the Marines were looking the other way and killed 1 or 2. I don't remember if they were both seriously wounded or both killed. And the 9-year-olds run back in the woods. And of course the guy next to him saw what happened, but they didn't kill the kids. The kids killed the Marines. So, I mean, the temptation would be just to blow the 9-year-old away.
Dang, you're getting cleaned out. We couldn't get out of this situation that we were in. We were on our way to this village to check things out, and got ambushed. And I had a 12-man A team that time. 4 of us got back. And we just, I don't know, Couldn't do anything. We couldn't do anything. There was nothing we could do but just hide. Nothing we could do.
You can't hold a 19-year-old in your arms and watch him die without realizing how short life is. And by the grace of God, in combat, I could tell you story after story where one man dies and the next man doesn't. I mean, it seems if you don't have faith in a creator and a plan for your life, it would seem totally random and not fair.
Yeah.
Some of the brightest died, and some of the ones you wouldn't choose to live because you couldn't stand them, are home today.
Yeah.
Life got more valuable. Life is more valuable. You don't think much about it when you're not in that situation.
There's a saying among Vietnam veterans, it don't mean nothing. And it got to the point to where it don't mean nothing. Nothing had any real meaning. The whole point of living was to go home. And anything that you could do to further that was acceptable. Absolutely anything. I had no qualms whatsoever about anything that anybody did that furthered that. I wasn't a believer then. So it was directly responsible for my coming to a belief in the Holy One. But at the time, I was terrified of dying, and I didn't want to die. But I saw life as pretty cheap too.
It hurts, and you stay with you all your life. It never goes away. That will stay with you the rest of your life.
I'm sure that I would have been a very different person had I not gone.
Yeah.
And I would not have been as cynical probably about the government and what it says as I am now. I don't know. It's a hard thing. This is the most prolonged I've talked about it in years. It's not something that I talk a lot about. I've never been to the wall. I'm afraid to go there.
I went to Washington to see that wall. There was a girl standing there. They had a lot of teddy bears and different gifts that they put along the wall. And she was standing there crying. So I went up to her and I said, "Sweetie," I said, "what's wrong? Is your husband on the wall?" She said, "No, my dad." And I should have known. She was too young to have a husband on the wall. I don't think so. Sometimes. She said, "No, my dad." I said, "Well, sweetheart, yeah, I know what you're going through." I said, she says, "Were you there?" I said, "Yeah, I was there for 3.5 years, sweetheart." And I put my arms around her and we just stood there and cried together. We cried together.
I dropped out of high school and joined the Army at 17. And I was very gung-ho. And I believed most of what everybody was saying until I'd been over there for a while. And then over time, it metamorphed and I changed. And by the time I left, I was opposed to the war completely.
Yeah, it changed to the point that I started really resenting these people. I resented the people who took us over there. It wasn't the people I was fighting with. I mean, there was good and bad in that too, but yeah, I learned quite a bit about the reality of war, not this John Wayne, Green Beret, Sanzo Iwo Jima, oorah, we're saving the world image. That sort of evaporated pretty fast.
When the country's not behind you, a lot of the boys, even the regular Army guys that we met, "Sarge, what? Why?" Well, I won't say what they said, but why the heck are we here? Why are we here? To fight communism. That's all I know, that's all I can tell you. Yeah, but our country doesn't even care about us. That's true, they didn't.
Looking back on it and thinking that there's 58,000 of my generation that died over there, and nothing really good was accomplished outside of probably some fantastic advances in rehabilitation medicine. I don't think we did a very good job.
The unit I was in at that time was very disciplined and had a compass that was focused on north, focused on its mission, focused on doing the right thing, and still believed in the war and believed that we were helping the people.
And I know my own feeling is that most of the people that died didn't die for God and country, they died for their buddies, they didn't die for other people, you know.
Looking back on it, it appears our politicians did a very, very poor job of directing the war. They should have pretty much if they decided to go, and I have never really decided whether we should have gone or not. But once we decided to go, we should have gone all out and not try to make it a political football.
The idea that we were ingrained with when we went in country, as we call it, was we're fighting for the Vietnamese, we're democratizing them, we're bringing all these good American ideals to them and all this business. And of course we saw TV clips of what was going on at home. We got letters, some positive, some negative, and it finally got to the point that within one or 2 or 3 months, if you lived that long, we were more fighting for each other. We weren't fighting for any democratizing or freedom for the Vietnamese people. And a majority, not all, but a majority of people by second or third month in country were resenting these people. And they're resenting the leadership, our leadership, and the whole war and what it was all about. So, no, we never really felt that the American people were behind us.
Yeah.
We were fighting for each other.
There was very, very little information that we would receive from the States outside of what we would get from letters from home. And during this time, there was the protests and whatnot were building, but we were not too much aware of that. We were basically just in a combat situation, surrounded by other Marines or other combat units. So we were just basically in a combat zone doing our job.
By 68, with the Tet Offensive, which was a major offensive of North NVA, we had basically lost, and I think the American people realized that. I think they were seeing through a lot of the things they were hearing and talking about. I think mainstream people were supporting us in some areas, but I think that was also a critical year, not only for the Tet Offensive and the Vietnam issue, but civil rights, and I think that was really the major beginning of the downhill, just saying, get out, we're wasting our time.
Coming back home, since I came home in a wheelchair, I was kind of concerned as to how I would be treated, how my friends would react to me. Now, when I went to Vietnam, I had friends take me to the airport, and we all hugged and kissed and said goodbye, and off I went. And when I came back a year later, those same friends met me at the airport. We hugged and kissed and went off down to the local beer parlor. And for me, it was like I was different, but nothing had really changed as far as my group was concerned. And that was probably the best thing that could have happened when I came back. So I did not run into the protests and whatnot that so many other folks did. I just ran into my family and my friends, and went on with my activities, went to school, did this, that, and the other thing, went racing and shooting, doing all the things I do, got married. Life just went on. It was just a steady progression.
I worked with a guy that went to Canada, and I didn't know that he went to Canada. It was none of my business. I didn't care. But when he started calling me a sucker, he said, "You went to Vietnam, you were just a sucker." I said, "Whoop, whoop, whoop." steady. That's not a good idea, son. And he said, well, you were. I said, well, what did you do? Did you join? Did you what? I went to Canada, man. Screw this country. Whoa. Say what? You're saying to heck with the country? But you're here now, and you're working, you're enjoying the fruits of the freedom that we have here? But you said you ran. You better stop right there. It's not going to be good for you. It really isn't. What are you going to do? What are you, Rambo? I said, no, I'm not Rambo. Now, John Rambo was fictitious. He was an actor. I'm not acting. I will clean your clock if you don't shut your face right now. I was in electronics school. And I got booted out for about a month.
I mean, there were some people who were grateful and, you know, they sort of understood our thing and they would ask me a lot of little details about what happened. But once they knew that fact, not so much that I was in an army or I was in the army as a medic, but, you know, you had to sort of hide that because people would really, even to the extent of, you know, having people throw things at you.
But yeah, we met a lot of people like that. I met a lot of people. When we got here, we got home. I didn't wear my uniform very long because I was a baby killer. I was nothing. It's a piece of garbage. So I took it off, so I got left.
Most people ignored me. A few people called me names. One woman asked me how many babies I'd killed. That was not the normal. Most people could have cared less. And I was very proud of my uniform, and I was very proud of the ribbons that I had. And it was very difficult for me to understand why most people didn't care.
When you see stuff like that, it hurts. It hurts because you don't know why people who know nothing about the atrocities of war will put you down when they don't have any idea what they're talking about.
Well, my immediate family was glad I was back, and they were somewhat proud of me. Not all, but somewhat proud of me. But most people just could have cared less. I didn't, you know, and I couldn't relate to that. So I hung around other veterans, and they were the only people that understood.
We had set up an ambush in a graveyard. The Vietnamese had very curious graveyards. Their people would be buried straight up and down, as opposed to laid out. And we set up an ambush in and around the graveyard, and it was near rice paddies and the river and whatnot. And we could hear something coming, which was unusual. But finally, I opened up, and then everybody else opened up, and we hit some flares, and found out that we killed a water buffalo. And during all this time, we've messed up the graveyard, and we got a little bit of trouble for desecration of graves and whatnot. Not intentional, but that just kind of happened to be the way it worked out that time. So that was our good, bad ambush.
Silk and I, for months, had been having these debates. What would happen if the North Vietnamese sent their Air Force down there? What could a Huey do against a modern jet? We were, you know, having this, and one day we were flying along, and this Air Force or Navy jet, I don't know which, decided to buzz us. Came out of nowhere, and I probably got within 50 yards of us and then came up. We didn't see it until it was climbing away from us, but it was so close, it rocked. The Huey was doing this number.
Oh, man.
And it scared the bejesus out of me. It settled the argument.
War is hell. That's what war is. It's bad, bad news. And if you guys ever have to go, God bless you both. I hope you never have to get involved in something like that. But like I said earlier, if your country calls you, please don't run. Don't do that. You have to live with that the rest of your life.
Well, I do know that if I had it all to do over again, I'd do it again in a heartbeat. I would prefer not to be paralyzed, but I have no regrets whatsoever of being in the Marine Corps, of serving my country, doing my part. I have no regrets about that whatsoever.
I pray God that you boys don't have to go through that. But if you do what you have to do.